Welcome back everyone to another Kerbal Space Program video, and in today's Kerbal Space Program video I'm going to be continuing work on my Mun surface base by sending up a refueling rover. So if you remember, about 7 months ago in my last upload I sent up the core of a Mun base to the Mun, or well, obviously it's on the Mun, and I mentioned in that video that I was going to need to send up a refueler in order to, mine ore from the Mun and refine it into fuel. That way, if we need to move anything around, like the base itself, which does have some aerospike engines on there, we have the means to do so. So that's what we're doing in today's video. We're basically just going to build it, send it up to the Mun, land it at the base, and that will be that. I did realize at the end of this mission that I didn't actually have an ore scanner in orbit around the Mun. That way I can't really tell where any ore is to mine it. So that's what the next video is going to be, is just sending up a orbital surveyor to scan for ore. But yeah, talking about what's happening right now, you can see I've already kind of built the frame of this rover. It's only going to be one seat because we only need one Kerbal to control it. We really could have also just made this remotely piloted with a probe core, but I just wanted to keep Kerbals on board just in case, preferably an engineer Kerbal, if that way if something broke, like some solar panels, we could fix those. I did record this video quite a while ago, like not too long after I recorded and released the first video in this Mun colony, so I don't think the new update where you could what's it called, the some assembly required update, I don't think that was out at this point, so I did not put any repair kits because I couldn't. So yeah, maybe that'll be something to add in the future. But yeah, usually just gonna have one Kerbal on here, and not many things really need to happen, but tons of batteries and tons of solar panels, so we have enough electricity to refine the ore. And I'll eventually add on some heat radiators, because if you've played Kerbal Space Program before and used refinery, you know that it does get really hot. It does require that heat to be radiated off the craft, or else some bad things could happen. You'll notice actually in the back of the rover itself, I added like this arm thing with the Advanced Claw Grabber Unit Junior, I believe it's called, and I'm using a Cal 1000 robotics controller in order to make this sequence, so I can press an action group, and no matter where the arm is extended, I can retract it into the kind of normal position, I guess, and I don't have to drive around with a arm sticking all over the place, and it just makes it easier to retract and it looks better. So yeah, so now that's pretty much like the first prototype of the rover. Not too much changes. I just wanted if I make a craft like a space plane or something, or a rover that's gonna go somewhere else after launch, I always like to test it first, because like for example here you can see that the steering was off, which you can do after it's made and it's sent on the Mun, but it's just better if it's in the craft file. So if I ever need to send up another one for some reason, I have it ready and done for. So yeah, so that was a basic test. Not too much needed to be changed, just the wheels. And I almost forgot to put on these cheetah engines, which are going to allow us to land it on the Mun. You'll see in a second. Right now that I'm going to do this test, I used a cheat menu to bring the gravity back, bring the gravity down to like 1/10 of Kerbin gravity to simulate Mun gravity. I do put it back up before the launch though, so don't, if you're worried about that, I do put it back to normal gravity before I launch the craft. So this craft does actually work in normal gravity. But yeah, so this kind of can give you an idea of how we're gonna land it on the Mun. It was a pretty tricky procedure to land it from orbit, because at first I had to line it up, make sure the inclination of everything was right, and I was passing over the base in orbit. But while I was slowing down, I couldn't just land it normally, with a lander, because if you're landing something on the Mun, it's usually not too important where it lands. You just want to make sure you get a nice steady descent, and you're decelerating at a nice at a nice slow speed, that way you don't break anything on impact. But with this one, I had to kind of balance out. I had to slow down my horizontal velocity as like, you know, as I was passing over it. And then once I was over it, I've tried to get my horizontal velocity to 0. Then I could worry about bringing it down next to the base. And I haven't done a lot of, you know, precision landings like this before, so this one was, you know, a pretty good test of my abilities, especially with a craft of this size. And I didn't put RCS on here or a ton of reaction wheels, which, you know, in hindsight that would have been smarter, you know, and it would have made the landing a lot easier. But yeah, the landing, which you'll see later in the video, was pretty difficult. But in terms of you know, the rest of the craft, nothing's too crazy. You can see I just built a stage, which is going to be getting us from Kerbin orbit to orbit around the Mun and help with some of the descent. And now the rest of the craft is pretty standard. It is a pretty heavy, not necessarily heavy, but it's not particularly a balanced payload, so we did need, you know, I did use those kickback and solid rocket boosters to give us the power, and the Mammoth engine as well. And the Mammoth engine does have good thrust vectoring, which does help with controlling it. And that Rhino engine again does have really good thrust to weight ratio. And yeah, I believe that's it. So now we're about to launch. And the ascent profile here isn't anything too out of the ordinary. I did have to, like I was mentioning before, the payload is a bit unbalanced, so I did have to make sure I was being very gentle and going, you know, proceeding with the gravity turn as smoothly as possible. But yeah, nothing out of the ordinary really happened. You know, standard procedure, trying to aim for 45 degrees on the nav wall by the time we get to 10 kilometers up, and then by the time we get to like around 20 kilometers or 18 kilometers, I tried to be almost completely horizontal, and then kind of just, you know, feeling it from there. So yeah, so we got our apoapsis up to 80 kilometers already, and that's going to give us an optimal orbit from here. It wasn't too equatorial. I did, you know, I was kind of going off heading during the launch and during the ascent, but it's nothing we weren't going to fix anyways, because we did have to use the ascending nodes and descending nodes to align our orbit with the Mun. Again, that comes down to being as precise as possible when lining up with the surface, with the base itself, because when I launched the base, I was kind of planning ahead, I guess, because trying to get my orbit around the Mun as equatorial as possible and trying not to veer off course as much as possible while landing. That way, if I get an equatorial orbit now, theoretically, as I descend, it should be easy. Yeah, and like I said before, it really wasn't. Yeah, not much more to talk about right now. Just planning my escape trajectory off Kerbin, or out of Kerbin orbit to get into orbit around the Mun. I did have those solar panels extended, just, you know, to try and maximize any time that we were exposed to the sun and charge up those batteries. Again, we did have a lot of batteries, so we're not really using a ton of electric charge right now. The reaction wheels aren't using that much, since it's not a really huge craft, so they're not working that hard. But, you know, trying to maximize, get the most out of everything. And yeah, now we're on course to the Mun. So we entered the Mun sphere of influence, as you just saw, and now we just need to do our burn to get us into orbit. And yeah, so now we're in orbit around the Mun. This is happening way faster than I anticipated. And now the tricky part begins, because we have to adjust our inclination again to get over the base. As you can see, I planned that out with the maneuver node maker. And if you look on the map really quickly right now, you can see that we're passing over the base almost directly over it. So we can fast forward to our next orbit, and I can start to slow down, and you can see that I had that red kind of target landing, and that's thanks to Kerbal Engineer. It's really useful when doing precise landings like this, because sometimes the orbital trajectory thing doesn't show exactly where you're gonna land, and you know, because it's kind of planned, it's thinking about if it's an orbit, but right now we want to think as if we're landing with the Mun. So yeah, that kind of just helps us be more accurate, and it shows up here, not just on the map screen. But yeah, so as we're getting closer to the base, I had to do some I guess some unorthodox methods of slowing down. You can see we were going back and forth really quickly, but we did end up coming really close to the base. Nice precise landing within 100 meters, I'm pretty sure, so that's nice. You know, we could have always driven there because this thing has wheels, but why take the long trip if we don't need to? So yeah, so you can see it already says insufficient source, something like that, and it needs at least 2.5% ore, and that's basically the problem that arises when I didn't think ahead about where I'm gonna land the base itself. But yeah, we can fast forward here to once I have the rover next to the core, I guess, itself, and this is kind of just a demonstration of how the arm is gonna work. I basically just extend it onto the rocket, and that way I'll be able to transfer the fuel into all of those the fuels. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. You know what I'm talking about, the fuel storage on the core. I'll be able to transfer all the fuel from the rover onto the core of the base itself. And yeah, that way anything that docks to the base can get fuel, and the base itself can get fuel in case it needs to be moved. Here, I just realized that since I used a bunch of separate pieces for those fuel storages, it's going to be a lot trickier in the future to transfer fuel from the rover to the base. But that's a problem for another day. That's the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed. Sorry I haven't uploaded as much in the past, like over half a year. I've kind of just been busy with other stuff and school. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like. And if you like what I've made in the past, consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. We're already at 85 subscribers, which is pretty impressive. And we hit the 1-year anniversary of the channel in September. So yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.